Take my hand.
A cancerous tumor is what they called it.
She laughed hysterically.
Curled around your spine like some kind of snake. Can you believe it?
My breath caught, my body slumping to the floor as my lungs flattened.
I didn't understand it first.
Julie continued.
The way you talked about them made me think you hated them, but you were just trying to scare me off, weren't you? Trying to protect me like always.
I looked at my hands, turning them around slowly, unable to bring myself to breathe. My right hand was still ghastly pale, with blue veins pulsing underneath, the skin hollow and stretched. Surely that hand had been shattered by Callie not but a day or two ago. The way I had fallen down the stairs. I had thought I was pushing through the pain, but in reality, it had barely injured me at all, had it? The way Callie slit my throat, there was no way I should have survived that. No way a human could have.
We were both just pretending all along, weren't we?
Julie smiled.
You were pretending to be human, just as I was pretending to be like everyone else.
Her mouth split into a wild giggle, and she twisted uncomfortably in her skin.
For the past 4 years, I've been pretending to be the one hung up on the massacre, the stupid girl who was so sad to see her little friends gone.
Her hands rested on mine, and she drew a breath, her face blushing red, for the first time seeming perfectly at home within her vile yellow irises and pinprick pupils.
We know what we are, don't we, John?
She writhed in ecstasy.
I used to be ashamed of myself, the massacre. Never before had I been so exhilarated in my life. I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought I had to act like such a dumb bitch, pretending to be all emotional and guilty.
She brushed the hair away from her dead eyes. Her face was inches from mine, and I could smell the stench of raw meat, see the strings of flesh between her teeth. Had she eaten some of the corpse?
Why don't you hate me?
She mocked, cackling with wild glee.
Yeah, fucking right.
She squirmed.
I wanted you to suffer. I always had a fascination with death, John. Ever since I was a little kid. My parents hated me. They thought I was sick, deranged. They didn't want anyone to know. They locked me away, tried to keep me constrained. But they couldn't stop me. I strung roadkill up around my room. That's actually how I nearly lost my sight. One of those damn corpses carried the retinal disease.
A siren whooped loudly outside, the sound of muffled, running footsteps reaching my ears from outside the door. Her eyes glinted with delight, slipping closed as her lips lightly touched mine.
And then I met you.
She whispered.
You were so kind to try and remove me from my oppressive and horrified parents. Unfortunately, my stupid uncle was even less tolerant of my obsessions. He was horrified to learn that I wasn't the sweet little girl he had always envisioned. When my dog wouldn't stop barking one night, I just strangled the damn thing. Finally put the fucker out of its misery. You should have seen the look on my uncle's face when he caught me slicing the thing open. He thought of himself as some sort of reformist. I guess he thought if he hit me enough, he could knock some sanity into me. He took this upon himself and became even worse than my parents, but I didn't want sanity. I wanted you, John.
Her smile curled to her ears.
Ever since you foolishly tried to save me,
She giggled.
I wanted you to break. You are way too nice, John, always trying to save people. Your hero complex is so damn annoying sometimes. I wanted you to be like me. I almost had you, too. My uncle rarely lay a hand on me, and after a while, I think he was too scared to do so. My bruises, the ones that got you in such a fuss, they were mostly self-inflicted, John. I love to watch you break down slowly, seeing you mull over the concept of murder. It made me so giddy, enough to where I maimed myself gleefully just to watch you fall. I knew if I could seem desperate and hopeless enough, if I could just injure myself enough, you would snap. When you finally were up at my level, we could finally be together, for real. I made that my goal.
Her eyes narrowed then.
But you didn't do it.
She gnashed.
You couldn't reach my level. You pussied out. Tried to get him arrested instead. Stabbing yourself and framing him for attempted murder. It's like something out of a dumb book. That pissed me off. I wondered why you were so hard to break.
Her eyes again slipped partly closed as she squirmed against me.
I just wanted us to be together, John. But we were both pretending all along, weren't we? We were always perfect for each other.
Her gaze was lazily drifting in a warm embrace, her pupils beginning to eat away at her sick yellow discs. Her twitching hands squirmed through my hair before the door to the room was suddenly forced slightly open, the table crumbling onto itself slightly. The voices now came into the room, fully intelligible as I called out for who I assumed was the disemboweled nurse. With splintering wood and plastic, the door was again forced open further, almost to the point where a body could slip through, and Julie's eyes suddenly twitched fully awake. Her form rapidly staggered to its feet like a broken doll, her hands clawing, and my breath caught as I noticed a light blur extending out an inch or so from her gray skin, warping ever so softly. 4 years ago, post-massacre.
Juliana Rowe.
The woman spoke softly.
She survived. She appears to be the only attending survivor of the massacre. She sustained minor injuries around her torso and legs, but appears to be in great physical health. Her mental state, however, is far less stable. She is unable to communicate with our staff and has repeatedly broken out into panic attacks, fighting her restraints and delusively screaming about monsters.
The woman leaned forward slightly, dropping down to become eye level with me before continuing.
Now, John, this kind of shock is considered rather common in victims of such traumatic events. It is quite likely that she will recover to some extent within the coming weeks. You shouldn't have to worry about her. She'll be discharged in no time.
My mouth was dry, my limbs still utterly unresponsive and weak as I stared ahead blankly.
Now, John,
the woman continued, her lab coat falling open to reveal a crimson-red dress underneath.
We had a deal, remember? I tell you about Julie, and you tell me everything you can remember leading up to the event. If you can recall anything, no matter how small, it would be very helpful.
I still stared straight ahead, my numb voice crawling out from my cold lips like spiders after several seconds. I was sick. I breathed softly. I was worried about Julie. I was just going to the house to ask her uncle how she was holding up. I faded back into silence, my eyes unblinking.
I'm not asking about that.
She spoke.
I am very well aware that that morning was traumatic for you.
She ruffled her papers faintly before glancing at me with dark eyes.
But I'm not the police, John. I have no affiliation with that case. I'm specifically interested in any information you have regarding the incident that took place within the classroom. The investigation into your individual situation has been postponed for a while. It has been postponed so I may ask you about more urgent matters. Now, John, please tell me about the days leading up to the massacre.
I know there was a test that day, I mumbled, nearly incoherently. The woman waited patiently for a while before softly ruffling her papers again. She slowly ran her hands through her red hair, the locks nearly the same color as her dress.
Nothing more?
She coaxed, her face going alight in a smile.
You haven't seen strangers about? Perhaps someone in your class beginning to act differently. A classmate that might have been acting unusually distant, perhaps? Have any of your classmates been exhibiting any unusual or violent behavior?
What? I stammered to the wall softly before my tired eyes flicked to the woman for the first time in a while. What do you mean? I continued. No, not really, but they said it was an adult. Someone with a gun. Why do you ask about my classmates? She paused for a second before replying.
Yes, of course. You are absolutely correct. I'll put you down as a no for that one.
She waited for several seconds before her voice slithered forwards again.
Any girls?
She questioned, her blue eyes boring into me.
None of the girls seemed a bit off to you? Maybe not even the day before, but perhaps in the weeks leading up to it. They may have mentioned that they were improving themselves.
What? No, I spoke, getting angry, barely even going through the scene in my mind. Why would I want to remember the faces of those I would never see again? I didn't really pay much attention to anyone but Julie. I continued slowly. I don't see why that matters anyway. The woman frowned slightly, her brow furrowing before she slowly rose to her feet.
Thank you for your time, John.
She spoke, her heels clacking on the concrete.
I can see you're not really in the mood to talk just quite yet. Please, try and take it easy for a while.
She was nearly to the door before she slowly came to a stop and spoke.
Oh, and you'll be happy to know that your friend Mark seems to have skipped that day as well. He is alive and well, just
Can I visit her? I asked quietly, cutting her off. Julie, where is she? The woman sighed.
That information is out of our jurisdiction. We couldn't get much information out of her either. She's been transferred to a psychiatric ward. Brethenock Hospital in downtown Denver, to be precise. If you want to arrange a visit, you'll need to speak with her caregivers. But John, I can tell you that she's hardly in any state to be seeing old friends. I'm sorry, but I am unable to assist you.
I stared ahead for several seconds, letting my eyes slip back down to the glossy chrome table silently. You said you're not the police. I stammered quietly to the table. Who are you then? Her heels clacked with confident strides as she walked back to the table, as if she had been anticipating the question all along. Her hands spread out casually as she leaned against the chrome, her form encroaching into my vision. I glanced upwards to see her face split in a wild smile, her hideously blue eyes crawling with delight as she leaned in even closer.
Others in my division may disagree.
She grinned, her gaze flashing to the camera in the room before whispering out.
But I know what it is that we represent. We are the future.
The door locked behind her as she stepped outside. Present day. Julie, please look at me! I screamed, reaching forwards.
What?
She stammered, caught off guard as my hand closed around hers. Her eyes slowly came to focus on my face, but it was hard not to notice the way her skin seemed to shift slightly. You're wrong, I said with building intensity. Julie, I don't know what's happening, but I'm not one of them. Her mouth began to slowly split into a smile, as if she knew I was joking, but I cut her off again, crying. And neither are you! Julie, this isn't you! I refuse to believe what you're saying! No matter how messed up the parasite made you, I know there's a person in there somewhere. I just can't. A voice called inside the room, followed by the panicked sounds of shuffling feet and the door creaking. Julie, I cried, holding her head as her gaze tried to slip away. Please, don't do this. I won't let this happen again. You can fight this. If you awaken now, you die.
You're so fucking naive.
She scoffed.
I told you can stop with that stupid act.
I went to continue, but the door was suddenly wrenched open, and my blood crystallized as two policemen burst in, guns drawn. My hands flew into the air, but Julie just swiveled to face them, a smile rupturing across her face. The policeman saw the body strewn on the floor, and I heard the jangle of their weapons as they trained their sights on me, completely ignoring Julie, who looked nearly as mangled as the corpse. I tried to stammer out words, but they all just rushed forth in a terrifying mess of sounds. The officers' fingers twitched on their triggers, the corpse likely more gruesome than anything they had ever seen.
On the ground, now!
One of them screamed,
Hands on your
the
head!
other speaking into his radio, sweat dripping from his matted hair. I complied instantly, nearly falling to the floor, watching their sights follow me. My heart grew further unstable as I watched Julie's eyes erupt into wild glee. Her limbs shuddered and, like a drunk puppeteer, suddenly took control of her limp corpse. She staggered to face the men, her hands clawing in front of her. Julie coughed out several bouts of hideously genuine laughter before her gangly limbs rose into the air and she took a staggering step towards the officers. The officers screamed as they drew their guns away from me and towards her. Julie didn't stop and took another step forwards, her hands slowly sliding down her body, nearing her pockets. I knew there was nothing in them, but I knew the officers wouldn't perceive it that way. "Julie!" I hissed in utter panic as a telltale spark of fear flashed through one of the officers' faces. "Don't give in!" I was cut off by the deafening percussion of bullet fire as the officer pulled the trigger. Julie staggered back, her eyes going wide in shock as her lavender hoodie was illuminated by muzzle fire and blood erupted into the air. Her skin drained of color as she looked down at herself with shaking irises. The policeman collapsed to the ground in agony, his kneecap shattered by the shot. The air surrounding Julie slowly returned to stillness as the officer's gun skated across the floor, landing mere feet from my hands. The other officer staggered back, looking at his downed partner in horror as a maniacal smile fragmented across Julie's face and the air began to crawl around her. This was bad. If she killed again, surely the parasite would kill her off for good, fully awakening and leaving nothing but an unstoppable creature in the middle of this hospital full of people. Julie's hands pressed against her sides, her fingers drawing blood from her own skin as she began to laugh again. The other people in the hospital scattered like flies at the sound of the shot, screams and panicking footsteps ricocheting through the narrow halls. The standing officer's skin began to slowly warp as Julie's eyes began to slip closed. His skin slowly flayed out from his body, his bones beginning to break. Suddenly, his head exploded outwards, painting the wall behind him with gore and skull fragments. His body staggered back, no longer having a controller, slumping against the wall limply and sliding down like a rag doll. Julie's eyes snapped wide open, her pupils constricting in shock and confusion as she whirled around to face me. The gun felt hot in my shaking hands. Light smoke emanated from the barrel, and through the deafening ring in my ears, I faintly heard the metal shell clack against the hard ground. My vision pulsed and blurred, the world spinning under my feet as I staggered upwards. I raised the weapon again, not so much as a thought flashing through my mind before I trained it on the other officer and pulled the trigger again and again, painting his body with lead until the slide stuck backwards and the heavy metal fell from my numb hand. The officer didn't die quickly. His body thrashed like it was on fire, my shots having been inaccurate and ineffective, many missing altogether. It felt like hours until his body finally lay still and blood pooled underneath him like a small lake. I couldn't feel my limbs, couldn't bring myself to move or think. Everything felt numb and distant. I needed to make sure Julie didn't kill again. But what the hell had I just done? The room bared no temperature, and time was no longer a constant stream, but rather wiggled through countless different speeds. warping just like my vision. Shadows passed in front of me, but I couldn't comprehend much of anything in my grayscale surroundings. Finally, however, some color bled into my perception as a large shape pulled back slowly. Yellow. Julie's eyes filled my vision, growing more intensely bright and vile as my gaze focused. A trail of bloody saliva trailed between our lips, and her hands tightened around my waist. I blinked slowly several times before the world came rushing back into my vision and the screams of the hospital crashed down in my ears like water from great heights. Julie's crooked smile ate at her face, and she swayed softly, leaning in again to kiss me before a gunshot split through the air and a percussive shockwave of air erupted out from her back. The bullet embedded itself in the hallway wall, barely missing the officer that had fired it. Julie whirled around, her hands still wrapped around my waist as the officer's eyes went wide in alarm and his two partners rounded the corner. Stop! I staggered weakly, knowing it was futile. Don't shoot! The metal ripped forwards all the same, and despite standing beside Julie, I still felt the harsh impacts of the slugs as she deflected their energy with sloppy precision. The bullets scattered in every direction, some simply shattering. We stood unfazed after the first round of fire, and I watched fear and confusion invade the faces of the three officers. I was certain that if they fired again, Julie's deflections would be less chaotic. She'd kill one of them for sure. "You can't shoot!" I cried, stepping in front of Julie, my heart leaping into my throat as I felt their sights on me. "The deflections will kill you!"
Oh, yeah, good point, John.
Julie squirmed, walking to stand beside me.
And...
She continued, her heels digging in as the tiles around her vaporized, laughter erupting from her throat.
That's no fun.
The policeman closest to her barely had time for his eyes to go wide before a hideous slash of air ripped out from Julie's form. I screamed in protest, but it was far too late. The cut cleaved across the officer's skull, flaying flesh in every direction and making a sharp crack, decapitating him instantly and leaving his shattered form to collapse to the ground. Julie shrieked in amusement, her foot slamming against the ground and causing the hallway to heave with unreal force. Fissures split across the drywall, the remaining officers staggering on their feet and spraying panicked shots. Julie cackled with glee, her eyes splintering wide as she hacked countless more slashes forwards. Patients rushed past in horror, likely unable to comprehend what was happening, many of them in no condition to be evacuating. A nurse attempted to scramble past Julie in a panic, but my chest heaved in horror as Julie pivoted to greet her, and a streak of red tore through the air. The nurse's eyes went gruesomely wide, blood spewing from her lips as a squirming tendril slowly threaded through her neck. Coming from Julie's back, the tentacle was pure flesh and bone. The tip would appear to be one of Julie's own ribs. Julie's form had torn itself apart, blood suspended in the air and flowing back into the gaping wound from where she borrowed her own flesh to construct the hideous tendril. She pivoted violently again and slashed the nurse's head clean off, her form further carving into itself and cracking with gruesome sounds as three more tentacles erupted from her back, splaying out into the air. Her yellow eyes flashed to look at me, her ghastly smile widening, black blood erupting from her own lips before trickling into what was left of her midsection. Her organs visibly squirmed behind ropey muscle tissue and patchy skin as she took a step towards me, and then spoke.
Guess who I am?
She grinned, cleaving the legs from a runaway before stabbing into their chest and slamming them against a wall.
That's right.
She cheered.
Rattle, rattle, rattle. It's Callie. Who the fuck needs chains, though? I honestly find it's hard to believe she's even one of us anymore.
She slashed the man's torso to ribbons and lightly closed her eyes as blood sprinkled her form like a dense mist. My mouth fell open in horror, my limbs flashing numb. How could she talk? The parasite was undoubtedly in full control now.
Speaking of which,
Julie cackled.
did you know you had a stalker? That stupid bitch, Callie. I saw the way she talked to you all those years ago. I saw the notes she passed you. When I went to confront her about it one day during school, though, I tried to get her the fuck off from my business. Well, you know what happened next. Who massacres an entire classroom after a few harmless insults? And I thought I was crazy.
Her squirming tendrils danced in the air, glistening with moist blood and fleshy strings. She walked closer to me, one of the tentacles lurching forwards to lightly wrap around my waist and yank me towards her.
One thing is for sure.
She grinned, her hands interlacing with mine as her skin shifted, hot blood pooling between us as several shots ricocheted off her form.
Callie sure did a shitty job. I don't know why she left me alive. But she's gonna regret it. If I had possessed these abilities back then, I would have made them all suffer, made them watch as I flayed them one by one.
Her yellow eyes sparked with ecstasy, her body shuddering with pleasure.
We could have done better, John.
She smiled, leaning in.
If anyone was to do it, we could.
My hands stung with intense pain as I slapped her across the face. "You fucking psycho-ass bitch!" I cried, my fists balling. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Her hideous eyes went wide, her hands slowly rising to gingerly touch her face as her tendrils slowly dropped to the ground.
What?
She stammered.
What's wrong?
Her mouth lay open slightly, pure confusion written across her face. "Where do I start?" I cried, taking a step back. "You just said you would have gladly made my friends suffer relentlessly. You've been manipulating me all these years for the sheer purpose of driving me to insanity. And I bet the only reason you showed up at my house this time around was to finish what you started with that." She stammered.
That's true, but why would...
Several heavy shots exploded against her form, and she flinched for the first time, her teeth gnashing. Her tendril ripped from my shoulder as she scrambled to all fours and tore across the wall, her tentacles slashing forwards to grip the surface. Distortions hacked the shooters into bloody fragments within seconds as she landed between them. She used her tentacles to pile drive one of the officer's skulls into the ground before picking it up and slamming it down again, her teeth clenching as her face went hot.
No one understands.
She hissed in between the jets of blood each time she smashed the skull down.
What am I doing that's so wrong? What am I missing?
She hacked the head from the body, slashing it with distortions before slamming it into the wall.
Don't kill.
She gnashed.
That's wrong, they say. Don't you feel sorry, they ask? So what if I don't? Nobody will explain to me why it's so bad. People kill animals all the time for food. What's the difference in doing it for fun? Everyone just gives up explaining halfway through and just says it's just wrong. How can I feel bad doing it if I don't know what it's supposed to feel like?
Her narrowed eyes flashed to me, her form meandering forwards like a possessed marionette with the help of her tendrils.
I just wanted someone who understood my side.
She spoke, still walking.
I thought maybe, if there was just someone like me, we could be together.
Her skull exploded, her face going dead white as her jaw was hacked clear across the room and the left side of her head was exposed. Her form staggered violently, her tendrils twitching like squashed spider legs as she stumbled left, then right, then collapsed against the wall. Clumps of bloodied, golden hair scattered into the air as she slid to the ground slowly. The offensive weapon slowly came to rest, the blurred metal coming into sight as the chain snaked past my feet and Callie darted forwards, instantly arcing another chain at the crumpled form. My eyes went wide with disbelief, but I was thrown from my feet as Callie's chain was slammed against the wall and the hallway resounded with a hostile crack of air. Julie's dismembered form leapt to the side, her her yellow eyes flashing with horrid glee as she ripped her own body apart, slashing 2 new tendrils into the air. Her ghastly head slowly reanimated, the broken portions mending together, her broken neck cocking her head at a horrendous angle as she cackled and blood rushed from her lips. Callie's green eyes flashed to me, her pale skin glowing in the fluorescent lights as her chains curled into view. She stammered awkwardly.
Sorry. Cling to life, breath is slowing, strength is waning. I cannot be fixed, screaming out to death. Will she let me live? Face the darkness, I am not ready, it is too late. I can't be saved. Voices call my name, angels whisper to